Hello everyone, this is your Warlord Mal, and I'll be reading the first half of my book, Ashidoth the Necromancer, for you here, for free. If you like the book, please consider picking it up on Amazon. It's available on the Kindle, for PC, and also mobile devices. Thanks guys, and I hope you enjoy this. Chapter 1, Fractured Morning. My name is Ashidoth Cruor. I am a necromancer of the Necroborg Nation. My nation is a great nation. We have survived plagues, famines, mastered much technology, and even the powers of the Shroud. This enabled us to see and manipulate spirits from the afterworld, and to reanimate corpses to serve us for labor or for war. Even more than this, we have the ability to program the souls of our dead, making them demi-dead and sentient. This allowed us to preserve the personalities of our friends and family to a certain extent. Life and death used to be in harmony. But now, the Will of Bones is the superior party in power. The Lichus Gabrita has decreed that all life is to be killed and prepared for reanimation, so that the Necroborg nation might persist eternally. The other necromancer party, known as the Fleshwalkers, revolted and declared Gabrita a dictator and an enemy of the freedoms that our people had achieved over the last 100 years. Death or life should be a choice. This is the way it has always been in Necroborg. And now the Fleshwalkers are on the run, having lost every major battle against the Lichus. However, this is so far above my head, it may as well be another nation. I am but a lowly death hand who prepared the necrocognition rituals to be imprinted on the mostly blank souls of the dead. Yet I find myself stirring to do something to protect my country, to protect my fellow citizens. All of my family has been devoured by the Will of Bones in one form or another. I must do what I can to protect my nation against itself. Here comes Ashidoth, Vorshin growled to me. Vorshin is my companion, who I accidentally trapped into a dog's body instead of a human one. It was one of my stupidest mistakes as a death hand. I saw the approaching woman, dragging the cart behind her. She was quite young, early 20s, and she would be pretty if not for the white acid pockmarks on her cheeks and forehead. She had worked hard for her family in the alchemy vats, most likely. Her shoes clapped against the solid black concrete beneath her feet as the cart she pulled creaked. She was wrapped in ragged brown clothing and was out of breath. She stopped to breathe heavily, looking me in the eyes. They were sharp and blue, contrasting her black hair that was flowing this way and that in the wind. 300 debtors. The price was high, much higher than I wanted to pay, but I could not bring myself to haggle with her, as she looked like she desperately needed the money compared to the black finery I was dressed in. A necromancer's wages were the highest in the city. All right, then. I looked her over again. Hey, you look tired. I didn't know why I was saying this. She looked at me, eyes squinted. What? All I was saying is that you should get rest. You look tired. Do you have sick children at home? Vorshin growled at me. Why was I reaching out to this woman? She bobbed her head, brushing a strand of hair away. Yes, 2 of them. Ever since the Will of Bones went off to finish the fleshies, there's been no doctors available. I knew what she said was true. Healthcare was normally costly, but still available. The war between the 2 powers had robbed everyone of the ability to cure something as simple as an infection or a cold. I could still take care of these things. Every death hand received necro-inversion training. I could help you. And them. The woman eyed me up and down. All right, fine, but just one night and that's it. My kids are really sick. Vorshin growled at me again. No, that's not what I meant. No charge. Now she started to look scared. Look, I don't know who you are, Penter said you were a safe deal to sell a body to, and I'm not a ghoul knight either. Look, times are tough, especially for a single mother. This is your husband, right? She nodded, looking distant. It must have been some time since he had died. I'm not going to turn you in anywhere. I owe my allegiance to neither party. I'm here to help a fellow Necroborg. Okay? She just looked at me, squinting through the dim sunlight. All right. I gave her the coins wrapped in lead paper. They jingled as they hit her palm. I began to haul the cart behind me, occasionally turning to look out after her. Vorsham barked at me and raised a paw for a second. That was the stupidest thing you have done in a while. We risked not only getting caught with an illegal body, but you want to risk going out and getting pinched by a ghoul patrol? I was a wanted man by the will of Bones for abandoning my post and for stealing original research into necrocognition. When I found out about Griberta's plan to kill everyone, I could not help but run. Yeah, I know. Vorsham huffed. We walked back through the black city, across smooth basalt sidewalks and under large obsidian archways. Shops and homes were abandoned all around us. Only the occasional stray animal would flit by. Necroborg did not have any homeless. You could always sell your body for blood at the Vitae Bank to feed your family. It was not a bad job. You worked 2 months for a year's wages. Of course, you did increase your risk of severe infections that were a challenge to cure, or the loss of a limb if the black rot caught it. But some people I had worked with had said that the nightmares you had while being drained for weeks were what made them stay away. Sometimes it would just be a repeat of your deepest fears. Sometimes you would just be floating in a black void by yourself, emptiness and loneliness for what seemed like an eternity. You could also sell your dead relatives into service as a labor ghoul. A necromancer would evaluate how much strength or endurance their body had, and then they would pay you a hefty sum depending upon your service duration. Each month, you would receive a stipend for your family's body doing mindless labor, minus the repairs and injuries the body caused itself. That is, unless they were particularly intelligent, or a necromancer. Then they were processed into demi-dead and given most of their personality back to perform intelligent, skill-based labors. Then you were paid a lot more. We arrived at home, a broken-down lead smelter that had been abandoned for the last 10 years. I unlocked the iron double doors that had an eroded bolt circle with a half-human skull in it, the insignia of Necroborg. Vorsham padded inside, smelling the air for any interlopers or ghouls. This was our normal procedure. Vorsham would smell for any intruders, and then I would use my nightmare glass to see any presence of the shroud. I lifted the translucent nightmare glass in front of my face, breathing into it to activate it. I saw the spiritual realm beyond through the palm-sized amber glass square, a howling mass of spiritual debris without any sentience at all, only hunger for life and the ability to deliver strange powers to us who could pay with our blood. However, there was no demi-dead or ghouls hiding in my home. I wheeled in the cart, next to an array of lead tools, syringes, and powders. I immediately went for my tome on necroinversion, flipping through to distillation procedures. To animate a body, one needed life from other living creatures. I lifted a dusty curtain that covered my collection of birds and other small animals. They all started hooting, chirping, gnawing at their cage bars. I began putting food into each cage, smiling as I pet them, then grabbed them and stuck them with a lead syringe. They squealed and bit at my hand as I drained a milliliter of blood from each of them. Unlike the Will of Bones, I never slaughtered animals or drained human beings for blood for necroinversion. I took a small amount from each animal and exposed it to the shroud to look for diseases. As long as it checked out, I used that instead for my necroinversion. Vorsham watched me from her favorite pillow, eyes drooping over white paws. Her black tail wagged as she watched me work. Tonight is their last night, their last fight. I felt like I had been saying the same thing to her all day. Yeah, I know, she replied with a wide yawn. You think there's any chance they could survive? I closed the cage on the last of the animals, grabbing my 2-liter flask of blood and heading for the distillery. I knew the Fleshwalkers stood no chance against the Willowbones. They would be hunted down to a man and destroyed for opposing the decree. I would be hunted down and killed for the same reason. I think they could stand a chance if they leave the city and fight from the outside. Perhaps some neighboring nation could give them sanctuary, and they could build an embassy for support there. Vorshin snorted and sneezed. You're joking, right? I stopped in my tracks and smiled. Yeah, I am, I guess. Vorshin whined, sensing my sadness. I am sorry. Your cause is worthy. I just don't see any hope for it. I smiled weakly at her. You're free to leave any time you want. I can send you back to the Shroud, too. Vorshin stopped wagging her tail and just looked at me. I couldn't do that. You need someone to sniff the house out. I don't think you're qualified for the job. I chuckled. She was a good woman. I was always curious about who she was before I accidentally trapped her into that body, but she refused to talk about it. I looked at the body of the widow's husband. This will be the greatest warrior who ever did not live. Being a demi-dead will make him the smartest warrior as well. Vorshin cocked her head to the side at me. Why is that? I plan on raiding the Vitae banks tomorrow. I will get a mixture of the nation's blood and filter out only the best fighters. You do know how crazy this demi-dead warrior will turn out then, right? I nodded. Sometimes you have to be a little crazy if you want to fight against insane odds. Vorshin just barked at that. I yawned. Today had been an extraordinarily long day. Good night, Vorshin. She responded with a paw wave and rolled over to her side. I walked into my disheveled bedroom with clothes thrown over every surface. Half-eaten food was abandoned on old plates and bowls. I took a strong pull of some vodka I had been distilling. It roared with fire down my throat and into my chest, resting angrily in my stomach. I pounded my chest and burped. I fell face first onto my bed, letting the alcohol's warmness creep across my body. Sleep yawned and swallowed me up. I saw my mother, laying on her deathbed. Her left eye was completely white and still. She was smiling weakly at me, strands of black hair in front of her good amber eye, the same color as nightmare glass. No one knows what is wrong, Mom. Dad and I have been working day in and day out to save for a necrosurgeon. I promise, we almost have enough to save you. Please don't die. She smiled at me like only a mother could, a kind, knowing smile, pale skin. I know what is wrong with me, and I know how to fix it. A smile leapt across my face. Then tell me, and I will do whatever I can to fix it. She just rubbed my hand that she held in her own clammy palms. She just kept smiling. Day after day, I did not move, but I knew that days were passing. I saw her lose both of her eyes to the infection. She would always tell me the same thing. I know it's wrong. I know how to fix it. I would always beg her to tell me what was wrong. I saw her die. My sister walked into the room, smiling at me, gray ash eyeliner heavy beneath her blue eyes. I know where to find Mom. I looked at my mother's bed and saw it was neatly made. Where? My sister just smiled at me, a kind, knowing smile. I woke up drenched in sweat. Chapter 2. Disintegrating Day. The wisdom of undeath is pure and simple. We all die. Flesh withers to age and loses its allure, and the mind rots back to its infantile state or worse. Such an evil should not exist with our enlightenment. We declare war on decay and spit on the yawning maw of death, that would claim our brightest sons and our most beautiful daughters. Lichis Gabrida addressing Necroborg during her first-year reign. The Vitae Cylindri was a massive structure of obsidian walls encasing a rotating chrome interior filled with amber pods of nightmare glass. Each pod held hundreds of sleeping Necroborgians. Night made everything difficult to see except for when a Lichfinger floodlight would wash over an area, letting the ghouls look for curfew breakers or people such as myself. I scooted around the high obsidian walls with Vorshin at my side. She sniffed the air and then brushed my leg with her muzzle, letting me know it was okay to advance. I was working my way slowly to the large opening that was guarded by two demi-dead in white robes that had kill batons in their belts. Those batons could spit a fast-moving bolt of necro-inverted blood when squeezed. Their range was pretty short, but if it made contact with you... I needed the Vitae in this bank for the warrior. I needed someone who could guard me when I entered the Veil of Eternal Night. Everything that the Will of Bones was doing is stored there, including how Gabrida planned to kill every citizen and reanimate them. I looked around, waiting for Vorshin to rub my leg again. A floodlight washed over a man with his family getting pushed into another cylindry not too far away. Anger boiled in me. Disappearances. The Will of Bones had been silencing any internal opposition to their plans by putting people away into cylindries. Everything within me wanted to bolt in front of the ghouls that were pushing the family and distract them long enough for the family to escape. I was frozen solid as my chest clenched up. I could hear my blood pounding in my ears. The children were crying to their father and mother as they were separated for the children's ward. They would most likely be drained dry. Vorshin rubbed against my leg. I did not respond. She nipped me in the thigh. I patted her neck to let her know I heard her and moved forward. I froze as I saw a Lichfinger light beam sweep over me. I drew up my black necromancer robe and stood still. Vorshin was black and blended in behind me, save for her paws. The light froze over us for a long second. I held my breath. Did the damned ghouls see me? The light swooped away. I let out my breath, and then nearly choked as I saw someone looking directly at me from the balcony of another cylindry. He wore a dirty white turban and had red-brown skin, foreign stone-chiseled nose, and hard brown eyes. He was gone a second later as the light left completely. I looked around, squinting at the details in the dark, seeing shadows everywhere now. I calmed myself and shook my head. Whoever he was gone now, and he was definitely not a ghoul. I was right next to the guards. If I sensed their undead nature with the nightmare glass, they would pick up that necromancy was being used. They could always sense when I used the glass, as if I had dropped a stone on the ground. I brought out the glass and activated it for a split second, seeing them make a move towards my position. I doubled around the cylindry, moving quickly over crates of wheat paste and other nutrients for the cylindry inhabitants. I scooted through a large doorway before the guards could come back to their post. The cylindry was brightly lit on the inside. The brushed chrome walls had 3 levels that were decorated with amber glass pods filled with a person on a small bed. They each had nutrient tubing being fed to their bodies, with blood tubing feeding out of them in a slow trickle. The blood was collected in centrifuges on the bottom level where I was. I saw 4 necromancers walking back and forth, checking blood measurements, centrifuge results, and of course the overall health of each person in the pods. I watched them all. I used to be one of them, diligently doing my duty, working for the greater good of Necroborg. I was happy, too. Those were simpler times. I lowered my bag of equipment slowly to the ground. I had 4 liters I needed to fill. The main tank containment was pumping through an umbilical pressure that was rubber. I punctured the umbilical with 4 lead syringes that had tubing to each of the glass liters at my feet. I opened the drain mechanism on the syringe and it began to use the pump's pressure to fill them. It was all a bit flimsy, but it worked. Vorshin sniffed and looked around for threats. No one seemed to suspect a thing so far. 2 of the necromancers were admiring a female in an amber pod. She was young and very beautiful. I wondered why she was in here and not married off. What terrible thing did she do, or worse off, who did she know that she was being held here by the Will of Bones? She's a beauty. No doubt, it is one of the perks of this job to be able to do what you want with everyone here, and no one will ever know. My face went cold with anger. What was wrong with them? How could they just treat their own fellow people like meat puppets? That girl was someone's daughter. She was being held here as an assurance that a particular necromancer would cooperate with the Will of Bones. This was the most likely case. I could go for a taste right now, to be honest. Hey, it's slow tonight. Go ahead and I'll keep a lookout for the others. The leaders stopped filling. I packed them away. The whole time watching the 2 men open up the amber pod and then lift up their robes. I could not stand to see this. I quickly used the nightmare glass again to trick the demi-dead into coming into the cylindry. Who is using necromancy in here? Hey! What are you 2 doing to that drainee? The 2 men stuttered as they dropped the fronts of their robes down and tried to quickly close the amber pod. I slipped out the doorway again, following Vorshin's quick stop, sniff, and move patterns. I was shaking with excitement as we made our way back to the lead smeltery. That was too easy. And with any luck, the demi-dead will turn in those 2 for a reward. Ironically, those 2 will probably end up as drainees in the cylindry as an example not to mess with the Will of Bones property. My smile faded quickly as I saw the man with the white turban and robe in front of the double doors. Vorshin growled loudly. I did not smell him. He held up both of his hands, slowly walking forward. I am new at your language. Go slowly. I was frozen, taking it all in. Who was this person? Why was he following me? There was no way he was associated with the Will of Bones. Who are you? He nodded and stopped 6 paces away from me. He only had a strange curved sword at his hip. I was surprised he did not have a rot wand or kill baton. I am Heinrichsen, acolyte of the Church of Apo. I come with no harmful intentions. His accent was strange. He was definitely from a faraway land. Necroborg was not known for its explorers, only its technology and cheap source of labor trade, and the corpse market, of course. I waited for him to continue. He chuckled nervously. I just have one question for you, and then I will leave back to my homeland. Yes? I had my hand on my Heartseeker knife. Through the blade I could hear and nearly feel the heart beating quickly in his chest. He was scared and ready to strike out. Why did you just sneak into that building and steal the blood? I snarled at him. What kind of a question is that? He nodded, as if acknowledging it was not a very good question. Why do you live like a fugitive amongst your people? You wear the black of a necromancer. You should be living amongst your people. I gritted my teeth. I should just cut open his heart and drag him inside. He sighed as he saw I was only getting angrier. He tried again. I am from a powerful nation to the east, not an enemy of your people. I am merely an ambassador. This was getting better by the minute. I grinned my fiercest and let my eyes shine in the dim light, holding my blade up slightly. You either tell me what you want with your next sentence, or I will kill you. He nodded again, never taking his eyes from mine. Your people have become a threat to my people. I am here to evaluate just what your people are doing to corrupt the spirit world, and to stop it at any cost. What? I squinted at him. Prove that you are who you say you are. An ambassador would have a seal from his people. He chuckled now, his bronze face wrinkling up. He had to have been in his mid-30s. It would take over a couple of hours to prove who I am. I grinned. All right, then I'll invite you in and you'll show me. If I am not happy, you get this in your heart. You know what this is, don't you? Heinrichsen raised his hands at the quivering blade and nodded. I walked him into the smeltery, placing the liters of distilled life next to the decaying body on the table, Heinrichsen wrinkled his nose at the smell and the display. This is unholy. How can you live like this? I sat down and grabbed some of the processed wheat paste, applied it to an apple, and ate it. I motioned for him to start. Heinrichsen stared at the rotten body for a few more seconds, looking back at me. I just stared him down, taking another bite. He took a piece of white gypsum from a small sleeve compartment in his dirty robes. He then began a very slow drawing on my floor. I watched him for 10 minutes, trying to make some sense of the figures he was marking deep and heavy with some sort of chant. All of it was nonsensical to me, and I gave up and finished my meal. He was only a quarter done with what appeared to be a circle when I got up to look at the blood leaders. I began filtering the blood leaders into a necroinversion distillery that would purify the blood to the memories, skills, and influences of a warrior only. Talents, such as a dancer's grace or a boat rower's stamina, would be absorbed as well. The only thing left to do was study up on how to apply the right necrocognition programming. I looked up when the blood was finished pouring into the distillery. He was finished and staring at me. Go ahead. This ought to be good. I braced my mind for some cheap illusion or street sorcerer trick that any tribesman or citizen could do nowadays. Heinrichsen yelled, eyes bulging, neck tendons and veins straining. Ira! The circle glowed red, and then the figures on the ground turned black and swept away from a wind that vortexed around me and Heinrichsen. The air turned broiling hot, and I had to step back as a globule of floating fire burst in the air, generating vast amounts of smoke that poured along the ceiling. I coughed uncontrollably, eyes watering, blocking everything I could see. I was instantly worried for the distillery being affected by the heat and fire. All of my work would be ruined. I reached for my knife. Do it and die, fleshling. The voice was harsh and rumbling and resonating. The fire was alive. I breathed in heavily but coughed again. Heinrichsen then made a motion to the creature with a look of annoyance. The fire suddenly inhaled itself and was only a sputtering finger-sized flame that hovered midair. When I had finished coughing, I simply stared in wonder at what this was. There was no way this was real. This had to be a trick. Heinrichsen smiled at me. My spirit familiar, Ira, an influence of flame. I looked at him with wide eyes, smiling large. How are you doing this? Where is the source of fuel? How is it floating and not spreading everywhere? Heinrichsen gave me a puzzled look. This fire needs no fuel. It is fire by itself, without need for anything else. But he does like to eat, much like fire does. He demonstrated by throwing some paper and other wood scraps I had on the floor into the small pocket of fire. No matter the size of the object, there was only a flash of light and ashes when it touched the creature. This is a spirit manifested through me. This is the proof you wanted, yes? I nodded, still not quite believing what I was seeing. A fire without a fuel source that could burn forever? With that kind of power, the steam engines that power the cylindries could run without the city chopping down all the surrounding forests for charcoal. The smelters could process all the metal without mining coal or worrying about heating up and cool down phases, and... Are you okay? I looked at Heinrichsen with a childish grin. Yes, I am. This is simply beyond anything my people have ever seen before. Heinrichsen smiled warmly at me now, the light of the fire flickering over his face. Just as your people's ability to bring back the dead and their minds is something we have never seen before. The acolyte then waved lazily at the fire in the air. Go now, Ira. No, I demand more tribute. Heinrichsen fetted another wood end. More! Heinrichsen's eyes lit up furiously. Back now! The fire pocket sputtered, then disappeared. What was this man's mission here with such power? So why are you following me, and why do you think I can help you? Heinrichsen sat down, eating one of my red apples with a crunch. I've been following you for weeks. When I came here, I was greeted with two armies murdering each other as fast as they could. Necroborg had been fighting internally for over 10 years now, but the Will of Bones seems poised to win. Still, why do you care? Like I said before, your people are corrupting the spirit world, our spirit world. The actions of your people are obsessed with death. As such, the spirit world is dying and being filled with death spirits. I was confused. This made no sense at all. Spirit world, and it was dying? There is no spirit world. There is only the shroud, where dead spirits are. That's all we can see when we look into it. Heinrichsen took another bite. Yet I pulled this fire spirit you just saw from this place you say does not exist. It was all beyond me. His powers, his knowledge. I wanted to know it, but it was just impossible. At least according to everything that I was taught. Matter and energy had to come from somewhere. They cannot be created nor completely destroyed. Fine. If you do not want to tell me how this creature or energy is constructed, I understand. I guess I would have some reservations teaching a foreigner our methods of necromancy. Heinrichsen looked at me baffled. I am not hiding anything from you. But enough of this. I need to know something important. I looked at him cautiously. He wielded great power. Why did he need me? He took off his dirty turban, revealing gold blonde hair. I need to know what your people have been doing for the past 10 years. Why it is causing the spirit world to die. I looked down. I knew a little of what my people were doing before I left. I don't know what they are doing to cause this. Vorshin growled at me. Your friend seems to disagree with you. Heinrichsen's eyes burned in mine. I looked away. Like I said, I don't know. I turned towards my bedroom, beginning to leave. Heinrichsen barred my path with his arm, his teeth bared. Then why are you trying to harm your own country? I have an idea of the power necromancers are given in this land. I have an idea of the work it takes to achieve it. You're smart. You don't like what your nation is doing. You know something dark, something evil. Don't lie. I ducked under his arm and went to my room, closing the door. I breathed heavily. This was getting complicated now. With just me, I knew how much damage I was going to cause Necroborg. I knew that I wanted to steer them from this path of self-destruction. I pulled out a lead coin that bore the circle and skull of Necroborg. It was rough, from being dropped and exposed to the elements at one point or another, but it was solid and strong as any lead coin was. I laid down on my bed, listening to Vorshin begin to softly talk to Heinrichsen. I closed my eyes, wishing he would leave. If I gave him any information, or helped him undo the damage my country was causing, he could give this information back to his own nation. They could easily invade if we were weakened. I could not let this happen. The bed was soft beneath me. Warmness began spreading out to my fingertips. I shivered as I felt comfortable for the first time all day. My feet ached from the long night and hard sneaking. Sleep yawned, and I fell into its mouth. It was my sister's graduation day. She was becoming a lichess, or rather, a bone maiden who was to be a part of the lichess. She was to give one of her ribs to Gabrita, to give her entire life force and sentience in a ceremony of ascension, all so that Gabrita could reach and explore the shroud further, to possess more knowledge from the realm of the dead. Don't do this, Heracult. There are other ways of exploring the shroud that we have not tried yet. I know what I'm talking about. I'm a damned necrocognitioner. She smiled at me, kind and knowing. She looked so soft. It was a waste to see this happen to her. I'm doing something great for Necroborg. Don't be jealous of me, Ash. I felt the desperation burning in my throat, a fire, a scream. Don't! It was a loud bellow full of helplessness. I grabbed her shoulders and looked at her, trying to convey all I felt through my eyes and into hers, to tell her just how wrong this was. She smiled at me, then set her jaw firmly, then frowned. I have to. No, you don't. You don't have to. She laughed softly, musical and feminine. It was the first time I recognized her as a woman, was that laugh. I have to, Ashidoth. This is my chance to do something great for my land, just as you have become serviced as a necromancer. I must do this so our country can prosper. Please. She looked distressed now, her frown tugging lines on her cheeks, tears misting her eyes. Please. She blinked, her face shifting from angry to resolved in a split moment. Tears ran down her face, but her voice was clear. I know how to fix this. I will tell you what to do. I looked into her eyes, a smile running across my face. What? I'll do anything. What do I do? She smiled and sniffed, more tears running down her face. I know how to fix all of this, and I will tell you. The desperation filled my voice again, cracking as my throat was dry. What? Please tell me. My sister was suddenly standing on a dais, arms chained to the chrome ceiling as two black-robed men lifted saw knives to her chest. Her breasts rose and fell quickly. Her eyes were filled with tears and mad resolve, like jumping off a cliff and thinking everything is going to be okay. I felt like I was falling, and nothing was going to be okay. I looked up, screaming at her not to do this, even though it was already too late. The men cracked open her rib cage, removing symmetrical pieces of her front ribs. She screamed, and screamed, and screamed. I screamed, as I fell down a black hole, watching her shrink infinitely far away. A deafening voice filled my ears, making them ring. I know how to fix all of this, and I will tell you. I woke up drenched in sweat. Chapter 3: Terminated Twilight. There will be no compromising with, nor tolerance of any opposition to our goals. We cannot afford mercy, nor can we pay the price of diplomacy. When a civilization gets closest to their moment of highest glory, they usually collapse into the forgetful pages of history due to being divided from within. Not Necroborg, for we have eternity and power over death on our side. Slothnik, Lord of Arms. I laid in bed a long time, thinking of my mother, my sister. My mind was racing, as was my heart. It was time to fix things. I leapt up out of bed, seeing the first rays of sun come in through the window. I had hardly slept, but I felt fully awake. I turned on the water spigot, waiting as rust and the other metals flowed out. When it was clear, I splashed the water on my face and looked at myself in the broken mirror on the wall. My dark brown eyes looked tired, but I could still see the spark of life and intelligence in my own eyes. Some people don't have the same gleam as I do. I don't know why that is. But I also looked like a man who had been living out of an abandoned factory. I swept my black hair out of my face and toweled water out of my stubbled beard. I did not even think of shaving or changing my clothes. Vorschen was laying outside my door as usual. She stood up and looked at me. We talked all night. He only went to bed an hour or so ago. I nodded and walked by her, leaving my door open. She followed me into the kitchen, which was past the distillery and the table with the rotting body on it. Where is he? Vorschen yawned with her big pink and black tongue. He is in the storage room, sleeping on our cleanest table. I finished putting wheat paste into a bowl, whipped some water into it to make a gruel. I ate silently for a couple of minutes. My mind was racing. I had to hit the Willowbones big. I also had to avoid my country being occupied by another nation at the same time. I had to make sure the spy did not go right back to his country afterwards. I would have to kill him after he helped me. Vorschen whined at me. This made me smile. I grabbed a bowl and filled it with some of the vitae I had stolen from the cylindry. Pure, thick, necro-inverted blood. She began lapping at it, even before it hit the ground. What is for breakfast? Heinrichsen was at the door to the storage room, rubbing his eyes. I have apples or wheat paste gruel. Heinrichsen grunted. No fried sausage, curry beans, or beer? I frowned. Your people have beer for breakfast? Heinrichsen laughed. Well, not all of us, but I do. I smirked and put the jar of wheat paste on the table, next to the dead body where the apples were. Never mind on the breakfast. Heinrichsen was putting on his turban and brushing off his white robe. I will be leaving now. I hope you achieve whatever it is you are trying to achieve. I know you are a good man. I looked up at him, in the middle of organizing the blood tubing on the body. Oh yeah? Well, why do you say this? I see you go out of your way to help children, or you stop the undead guards from taking people off the street by distracting them away. Like I told you last night, there is an evil in this land. You are hindering it. That means you're a good man. You are holy. I nodded to him. Thanks. Although you cannot leave. He reluctantly grabbed an apple, eyeing the dead body. Now it's my turn. Why is that? I'm going to help you, and help Necroborg, but I need you to promise me something. Heinrichsen bit the apple, talking in between chewing. Sure, what? I breathed in, and then looked him fiercely in the eyes. When we are done here, you must convince your people not to invade my country. Heinrichsen took another bite, chewed for a while longer. He finally put the apple down and talked softly. I cannot promise you that. My ears burned. Your people will kill my people, just for being different. Our powers can cause great good. Heinrichsen shouted at me. You are killing yourselves and the world around you. You are a plague upon this world. Necroborg must burn. I came to you because you feel the same way. I felt trapped between two raging rivers of thought. Revenge for the wrongs I had witnessed, and love for my people and what we had accomplished. Heinrichsen continued, pounding a fist on the table. Necromancy is unnatural and one-sided. It relies on draining the life of your people and the life of your own livestock around you in order to exist. This time I snapped. Life feeds on life. This is the nature of our world. You are hungry, and so you kill. You eat the flesh and life of another living being. Necromancy uses this to free us from the curse of eternal labor. Instead of dooming our sons and daughters to mining or farming, they can pursue a higher existence of learning and advancing knowledge. Heinrichsen bellowed at me louder. Oh yes, you have achieved so much. You speak of choices and a higher living for everyone. You speak of freedom for your people. You are a liar. You are still spreading your own people's lies. I don't understand you, Ashidoth. You fight and steal and damage your own people, yet you claim to be an advocate of them. You abandoned your people long ago. I felt beaten and weak inside. I had been doing this for so long. Now I was face to face with two different masters of my life. I could choose to acknowledge the wrong of our ways and let our people burn, or I could embrace our knowledge and tradition and fight for a different way. There was no way I would let my people die, nor our knowledge. Necroborg was building a paradise. Was being the key word. Somewhere along the way, we started pursuing knowledge over life. We were stuck. We were lost. Heinrichsen was waiting for me to respond. I saw his hand near his weapon. He thought I would strike him. I wondered if he had already completed the circle of drawings to summon his fire spirit. I have not abandoned my people. The Will of Bones is responsible for leading us into darkness. I plan to take whatever action necessary to lead us into the light. Necromancy is not to blame. It is the people and how we use it. We are using it wrongly now. It must be set right by me. Heinrichsen was breathing heavily. He took another breath and then sighed, letting the tension in the room out. He nodded at me a couple of times, as if measuring my words and my ability. He was judging the worth of my life. He eyed me with his left eye, head dipped forward. If we can accomplish as much as you are saying, then I do not see a need to convince my people to go to war. I smiled grimly and bobbed my head. But I cannot promise that they will not choose to go to war anyways. I am here to evaluate just how much of a threat your people are. I looked into his eyes. He was so truthful, I was so used to the deceit of the Necroborg courts, the power plays of Lord Necromancers to gain more students for their projects, or more wealth for their services. Either Heinrichsen had told the truth every time, or he was one of the best manipulators I had ever seen. Either way, it took absolute courage to do this with a man you barely knew. I believe you will do what is best for both of our peoples. I clasped his forearm and shook it. He nodded at me matter-of-factly, his red mustache blocking his lips. He just stood there, as if he was still weighing my words. I know he did not believe me. I still might use him and kill him at the end of this, even if he believed me and I believed him, as people would need the vital information he would provide, and he would be honest with them. They would know our weaknesses. He backed away from me. It is your turn to prove yourself. Tell me how we are going to weaken your nation. Convince me that after this is done, they will not be a threat to the spirit world or my own kin. I stretched my arms out by leaning on a wall until I heard my shoulders pop. I was working with a lot of other necromancers on a large endeavor, the biggest our courts had ever done. I was a death hand, the lowest ranking necromancer in a cabal, but I was talented at necrocognition. Seeing Heinrichsen's confusion, I backed up and motioned letters with my hands. I programmed souls. I wrote logic rituals for them to obey. A soul from a dead spirit is blank. It knows nothing of this world. I give it the inputs it needs to control its body, to know what to say to who, and how to be more normal like us living humans. Heinrichsen rolled a hand in a continuing motion. Ah, yes. We have the same process we must go through with spirits to communicate with them. Acceptable methods of them communicating to us, and us to their kind. That way fire elementals don't char us to the bone, and we don't bring them into the rain. I laughed loudly. No. There is more a direct command from me. I must tell the spirit exactly what to do, or else it won't do it. For example, if I don't instruct them on how to sit, they cannot sit. The same goes for talking, what words to use in different contexts. It can get quite complicated and long. Heinrichsen's eyes were blank. I grabbed an apple. That's not too important. And it was not strange to be working on this, as this was what I was trained to do. What made it strange was the amount of rituals I was to write and how I was instructed to write them. Normally, I write some or most of the commands for the soul I am working on, as in, if we need a minor, demi-dead, to replace the one that got crushed in an accident, I simply write the instructions and activate the proper lead inscriptions on his skin to instruct the spirit in swinging the pick, what to look for, how to avoid other minors, what to do if he or she gets hurt. But these rituals that the Will of Bones had me working on, they were big and incomplete. It was as if we were instructing the sky to be aware of the earth, how to make the earth pull all the beings down to itself. Heinrichsen's eyes were squinting as he tried to grasp the concepts. This sounds like an arc spirit. It was my turn to look blankly at him. An arc spirit is what the ignorant tribesmen refer to as a god, an extremely powerful spirit that commands a host of lesser spirits to do its bidding. The sky and the earth are arc spirits. The sun is an arc spirit. That black presence growing in your city, what you call the Shroud, it is most likely an arc spirit of some kind of death or decay or something worse. It was strange to me that our two vastly different beliefs were now colliding together in a very real way. I did not believe in his spirits. I felt like they were something else, an intelligent force, but not the undead souls of human beings in the afterworld. But this arc spirit was definitely sounding close to what Gabrita was working on before she last went missing, before she gave the order to start the processing of all life to unlife, before the awful war between the Will of Bones and the Fleshwalkers. Whatever it is, that's what I am going to aim to destroy. I am responsible for building the necrocognition processor, or at least the schematics for it. I fled my post before they could turn me into a lich. I saw most of my fellow death hands be converted, one by one, without their consent. They were abducted. The next week they would arrive, nothing but bones and neatly preserved flesh, no muscle on their frame. I shivered as I remembered their eyes, There was no gleam in their eyes, nothing at all. The lich's eyes did not move, only their head did. All mechanical, no grace of life. Even a demi-dead could be lifelike, as they still retained their memories. Liches were the terrifying, crowning achievement of the Will of Bones, their perfect unlife. Heinrichsen cleared his throat and moved to grab something in his robe. "This place you speak of, it sounds like it will be heavily fortified, lots of guards. How will we even get in? Even if you sneak us in, they will know when their precious machine is destroyed." I patted the dead body. "That is what this is for. He will guide us to victory. A perfect warrior, a perfect guardian, a perfect saboteur. He will have all of my knowledge to get us in and out stealthily. Even if I die, he will be able to finish my task." He shook his head. "And what if he refuses to do this for you, refuses to die?" I raised my shoulders and snorted. "What? A demi-dead cannot refuse a necrocognition he is programmed to follow. These are not your fickle spirits we were talking about, Heinrichsen." He dipped his head in agreement. "Yes, but you'll have to give him the ability to make his own decisions, yes?" I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "Well, then, he could decide not to help you, to die for you?" I shook my head quickly. No. His utmost instinct will be to protect me. I can relay in the protectiveness of a mother and link it to me. His loyalty will be strong. Now, that's not to say there will not be quirks in his personality. He might say, want beer for breakfast. Heinrichsen smiled at this. "I think I will like this warrior." I started to say something else, but Vorshin interrupted me with a bark. "Don't forget about Ine and her children." I had completely forgotten about Ine. I cursed myself. Why did I promise to go meet her? "I did not know you were married." I rubbed my face and laughed. "I'm not married to her." Vorshin raised a paw and jumped up, her claws clacking on the ground. "She is the wife of the perfect warrior Ash is making. He is a sick and twisted man, no? Getting closer to the woman through curing her sick children. As if taking her dead husband was not enough, he seeks to replace him." My eyes flared wide open. "Vorshin! I will not feed you for a month." Heinrichsen pursed his lips together, and then started to chuckle, building up until it was a roaring laughter. "You dog, Ashidoth. You are human yet." "I am not after her, Heinrichsen. Not in any way. I offered so that she would keep her mouth shut." Heinrichsen and Vorshin were just laughing at me now. My face burned. "Vorshin, why don't you make yourself useful and start scouting for ghoul patrols along the way?" Vorshin laughed and padded off through the exit I made for her in the front of the smeltery. Heinrichsen put his hand on my shoulder. "I will join you. I would like to see more of your necromancy and how it can do good." I sighed. This was the longest day yet, and it had barely started. We met in front of her home. It was in the rural outskirts of the city. Most of the people here had been pulled into the cylindries, or were being processed into ghouls. The Will of Bones would soon devour the whole city. I shook my head at the idea. There was a way out of this nightmare. I knew a part of the solution. With Heinrichsen and my warrior, it would be more possible. Some of the home's wooden doors just flapped in a breeze that flowed through the streets, carrying a hint of garbage and rotted flesh in it. Heinrichsen gagged for a second. Vorshin growled. "What is it?" "I don't know just yet." She started sniffing around, going behind the house. I knocked on the door. Heinrichsen smoothed his dirty white robe. I cleared my throat. Her windows were boarded up. Something was not right here. Had she been taken to the cylindries? Was it because someone had found out about her selling her dead husband to me? Did she say anything to them about me? I pounded my fist against my palm. It was really stupid to come here. I started to turn, to leave to the house. Demi-dead. 3 of them inside. Vorshin was standing adjacent to the house, in its shadow, her green eyes giving off an unnatural light. I pulled my Heartseeker knife out of my belt and grabbed my nightmare glass square. I breathed in and out. "All right, Heinrichsen. They already know we are here. They will either follow us back to my home and kill us there, or we can fight here, hope to kill them, or at least die here on our own terms." Heinrichsen answered by pulling his curved sword and a brown pouch from a robe pocket, It leaked to silvery dust. Itchy, cold sweat popped out on my brow and scalp. Nervous twitches filled my body as it prepared to fight for its life. I leaned towards the foreigner, whispering softly, "They have kill batons and rot wands, most likely. Move quickly. Don't give them time to aim at you. Even a slight graze by a rot wand shot will kill you in a couple of hours." Heinrichsen looked at me bewildered, but he nodded. It was obvious his people had almost no experience with ranged weaponry fighting. I only had basic arms training in the Necromancer camp. We would probably die from doing this. On my knock, you go around the building and attack from behind. I will surprise them from the front while Vorshin goes in through the basement. Heinrichsen quickly and silently moved around the battered, dusty home. I nodded at Vorshin, who raised a paw at me and headed around to the open basement entrance to the house. I waited the longest 10 seconds of my life. Then I knocked again and dove towards the dirt lawn just as the door exploded in a dazzling magenta and black flash. The splinters of the door quickly turned to a black sludge. If all 3 of them had fired their rot wands, it would take a couple of seconds to recharge them. That would only leave the kill batons to worry about. I scrambled to my feet and heard Heinrichsen charging into the room with a scream. From between the nailed boards on the windows, I saw a silvery flash and dust explode from the cracks. I then heard 3 guttural roars, followed by a deep, chinking sound. I entered into the doorway, seeing 2 ghouls clutching their eyes. The third was on the ground, with his skull split open. Heinrichsen was raising his sword to carve another, as Vorshin was racing into the room from the basement door she had broken through. The 2 ghouls lifted their kill batons towards Heinrichsen. I dove and knocked the air out of the spiritualist, saving his life as 2 blooms of black light made small holes in the ceiling, and another 2 darts of light ripped small chunks from the wall. The kill batons were no longer a threat. I crawled toward a ghoul and stabbed him. My knife automatically sought the heart with an upward jerk, sensing blood and life. The ghoul slumped over with a gurgle, still swinging his wand every which way. Vorshin snagged the throat of the final ghoul, using her weight to bring him to the ground and then rip his jugular out. The ghoul still swatted at us with its wand and baton. I prayed the rot wand was not recharged. Heinrichsen dashed forward on all 4s and brought his sword down on the face of the ghoul, splitting it down into the brainstem. The ghoul just twitched but dropped his weapons. We all just laid there for a couple of minutes, panting, staring at the 2 blackened holes in the ceiling where the kill batons had struck. Instant death. No one survived a kill baton. I can't believe we all had survived. I can't believe we all did not have severe wounds at the least. What had this foreigner used on them to make them blind? Heinrichsen, what did you do to them? He grunted, sitting up. It was a gift from a spirit of life, for saving it from being absorbed just outside your city. I used it to blind them with a blast of light. That stuff usually fetches a high price with miners, as you can slow burn it in a lantern for days. Produces no smoke, no heat. You owe me for that. I was up on my feet, nodding at him. His people possessed a great diversity of power. All my people's knowledge was centered around life and death. I doubt we would stand much of a chance in a war against them. Heinrichsen was looking at the crooked black wand and baton on the floor. Our people would die by the thousands. There's no way we could fight you without severe losses. Your people seem to have perfected the art of killing. I smiled at the irony in his words. Not just death, Heinrichsen, but life too. Our people live to be well over 100 years old, sometimes 200. The undead you see can live indefinitely, but at a cost to the living. Vorshin's ears then perked up. I hear somebody. We all scrambled to take cover behind damaged chairs or walls. Vorshin's ears remained high. I could hear the blood in my ears, ringing, the beat of my heart. If the patrol had backup coming, we were dead. It sounds like a mouse in the walls. My heart was beating out of my chest. I breathed out heavily. Don't do that, Vorshin. Heinrichsen just laughed, slumping against the wall. But I hear something else. It sounds like a voice. There, in that back laundry room. We all followed Vorshin into the laundry room, where there was an amber pod, with an A and her 3 children in it, nestled among piles of dirty clothes. One of the children had awoken and was scratching at the glass and yelling as loud as she could, but only a small fraction of the sound was escaping the pod. She was at least 4, curly brown hair, and had her mother's blue eyes. I could see that the two were sick, and they had caught their disease as well. A white fungus of some kind was spreading underneath their arms and faces. I had to get them back to the smeltery where my materials were at. I saw the amber pod had a padlock on it, and went to search the guards for the key. None of them had a key on them. I then grabbed a rot wand, which was recharged by now, and squeezed the gnarled black handle. The wand vomited a black bolt at the padlock, wrapping it in a black and purple light, and then causing it to rust rapidly. Some of the surrounding amber glass turned brittle and broke as well. Heinrichsen followed the cue by smashing in the broken bits with his sword handle and then lifting the crying child out. I got into the large amber pod and lifted Ine out and onto a laundry cart that was nearby. I then put her other two sickly children next to her, their legs sticking out at the end of the cart. Heinrichsen, did you see another cart out back? He nodded to me, smoothing the little girl's hair back and trying to comfort her. Load up the ghouls into the cart. We can't let anyone know we were here. We have to make the other ghouls think that their friends went feral and ran off to eat Ine and her children. Heinrichsen grimaced at what I said, but followed the instructions. Vorshin then yowled and jumped up. I looked over at her to see the ugliest, fattest albino rat, with its intestines hanging out of its bloated belly, running under her and out the door. Vorshin immediately gave chase after the undead rat. I pointed the rot wand at the rat, but then lowered it, not wanting to hit Vorshin. I turned back to grab the cart and saw 3 more rotted black rats, with only skulls and dried fur pelts clinging to their skeletons, running out of the laundry room. Fear washed over me. There was no way we were making it unnoticed out of this. Hurry, Heinrichsen. Load the ghouls up. The ghoul lord will know we were here. We have to hurry before a patrol gets here. Heinrichsen ran around to the front and loaded the ghouls up, taking a wand and kill baton for himself in his belt. Vorshin came back with the raw, mangled white rat twitching in her maw. I got it! I shook my head at her. It's too late. There were 3 more rats that fled from here. Sniff out any patrols that might intercept us ahead. We have to make it out of here with everybody. Vorshin sprinted off down a dirt alley. Heinrichsen then stopped for a moment. If they are already alerted to us being here, then let's just leave the ghouls. I can better defend you and the others if I don't have this damned cart of rotten flesh. I gritted my teeth as I started to run with the cart. I need them, Heinrichsen. For the warrior, I need more body mass, lich blood, and their organs. Heinrichsen gagged as he raced to catch up to me. Somewhere in the city, I could feel the 4 red eyes of Slothnik on me. I knew that I had only days to construct the warrior. I had only days left to live. Chapter 4. Eve of Unlife. There is a true melancholic beauty to being demi-dead. Life will change around you, but you never have to worry about yourself changing. After my first 100 years of unlife, I started to take a yearning interest in seeing all my friends and family die. We celebrated each disease, each long-suffering moment until death came. We drank and took part in every drug imaginable. And after you die, it is like your teenage years are over. You can't feel that way again. This is when you start to hold on to other people who have not died, observing their every suffering and every happiness, so you can hold on to what your unlife should be about. Unknown Necroborg Poet. I stared hard into the nightmare glass. The swirl of the shroud beyond cloaked everything I saw through it in a sepia tone. Scraps of spirits whipped by. My nose started to bleed. I kept concentrating on the chair in front of me, on its cracked back leg. The shroud had taken its share of wealth from me. Now I directed my thoughts to breaking the chair leg, on forcing the decay of the shroud on the fracture. The chair creaked and then collapsed. Vorshin stood up instantly, looking at the chair, licking her lips. Heinrichsen came in from the storage room. What happened? I wiped the blood from my nostrils. I had done it. I could do more than sense weakness and decay and undeath around me. I could finally direct and pull the shroud's energies into the physical world for a time. I turned to look at Heinrichsen. This would be the real test over my increased power over the shroud. It was a real trick not to let it steal all of my life. That is where the mental discipline came in. What is it, Ashidoth? I stared hard at him through the nightmare glass. I felt a sharp pain in my side, and I coughed a bit of blood in my mouth. But I felt the shroud finally give up a portion of its energy. I was thinking of Heinrichsen, of forcing the energy onto my thoughts of him, but through the shroud. My mind briefly entered the undead realm. I saw my mother rotting in front of me on a bed. I know how to fix this. I shook my head at the daymare, but I did not close my eyes. Heinrichsen looked alarmed and began chanting on his own. Vorshin looked at Heinrichsen and calmly said, "Don't do anything. He is simply channeling the shroud. Nothing terrible will happen." Heinrichsen stopped his chanting and just stared at me, eyes wide, looking for some sign that I was fine. I imagined casting a net into the shroud and catching the energy I had put into it. I dragged it back into my mind. Through the nightmare glass, I saw Heinrichsen as an old man briefly. All the while, more pain echoed across my body. "Yari. Your middle name is Yari." I breathed out finally, mentally and physically drained. Heinrichsen was stunned. "What? How do you know that?" His hand was on his sword. "The shroud told me." He paced back and forth. "How does the shroud know my middle name? What evil are you bringing upon us now? I don't want to be involved." Vorshin bared her teeth at him. "Calm down, you superstitious fool. He is preparing himself to sort through the memories of the blood he stole, to get the right talents and memories for the warrior." Heinrichsen sat down and put his hands through his red hair. "This is wrong. Everything you people do is tainted." Sweat dripped off my eyebrows. "What do you mean tainted?" He thrust a hand towards me. "Look at you. It is obvious this realm is taking your life from you in payment for what it gives you. Your nose bleeds. You are as pale as a spirit. I even bet your mind has waking dreams. Also, I am convinced you have nightmares when you sleep." I barely had the energy to frown. "How do you know this?" Heinrichsen stood up again and put both of his hands down on the table next to the soon-to-be warrior. "My people have been worshipping and studying the spirits since we lifted a wooden spear to hunt wild animals. All spirits demand payment in one form or another. This shroud of yours is no different. The real difference is that this one demands a heavy price of life and suffering for its powers." I shook my head. The shroud is not a spirit. It is a different dimension, outside of our own, outside the material realm. Contact with it does cause degradation in the living, but undead do not feel the pain or damage of its touch. This is one of the reasons Gabrita wanted everyone to be reanimated, so we could possess more power and grow as a society towards more necrotechnology. Heinrichsen looked at me as if I was insane. "Which side are you on? You renounce the will of bones, yet you use their powers. You were killing yourself." I had enough strength to stand up, preparing myself for a rant and to look into Heinrichsen's eyes. "This is necessary. Our powers must have a cost. Necromancy and the shroud are not the problem. It is the tyranny of Gabrita and the will of bones that must be destroyed. More than that, shouldn't it be our choice to remain alive if we want to? That's what I am fighting for, and that is what matters, even to you. Much is lost when one dies and is brought back. You lose your sense of touch and taste, for example. You feel empty. Emotions are just a shadow of what they used to be. You feel dead. I don't want this. I know our people do not deserve this forced upon them. Does that clarify my belief in our powers to you, foreigner?" Heinrichsen eyed me back. "It does. But let me make myself as clear as you have. This power has tainted your people, and it has tainted you. If I start to see you act like any of the undead I have seen around the city," I finished his sentence for him, "then kill me. But until then, you promise to help me. Remember that." Ine came in from the kitchen with a wooden board that had fresh bread, roast carrots and potatoes, and surprisingly, butter. Heinrichsen sneered at her as she came into the room. "I am not eating after that rotting thing made our food." I nodded at Ine as she left the food on the table. and went back to the kitchen. She is not infectious. She is in the last stages of the disease before it begins to damage her brain and leave her to die in a coma. Heinrichsen looked at me and then at the floor, his face calm. All right, then. I will heal her. The spirits of life can remove the sickness from her flesh, and without tainting her even more with your death sorcery. I thinly smiled at him. No, she does not have that much time, and I need to make sure it gets done right. Heinrichsen barked at me this time. Right? The spirit of life she already has in her is dying. It is the other spirits that can make her whole again, not more death. What will you do? Chop her open and remove the fungus? Direct killing energy into her blood so that it kills her and the fungus? Heinrichsen was smart. I had to give him that. He outwardly appeared to reject what we were doing, but he was beginning to understand how we functioned at least. Fine. I'd let him show off his tribal spirit worship if he wanted to. All right. You do it. Heinrichsen blinked at me. I guess he was expecting more of a fight. Woman, come here with your childers. I chuckled. We call them children. Heinrichsen ignored me, instead pointing at 3 open chairs. Anae and her 2 children shuffled into the chairs, sitting down. They smiled at me, and then back at him. I could tell they were frightened of this very strange man looking fiercely down at them, with his head of foreign curly red hair and frozen blue eyes. The cost of receiving life is high. This place is cursed. Do you accept the toll of the spirits upon you, to follow their oath until the end of your days? Anae looked at me, her eyes begging me to get her out of this. I just nodded at her. I hoped Heinrichsen knew what he was doing and did not roast them with his fire spirit. Yes, I do. Heinrichsen looked at her children, 2 boys with long black hair typical of Necroborgs. I need them to say yes as well. She looked confused. They are just young boys. They don't understand what's going on. Heinrichsen frowned. Then explain it. The spirits will not come to help you unless you agree to their terms. Anae put her arms around them. You need to tell the man yes. We will need to follow what he says we need to do. The 2 boys rubbed their eyes. They could barely stay awake with the fungus attacking their metabolism as it did. I felt terrible they had to go through this, but they were so far gone that I did risk killing them if I operated on them. Heinrichsen better be damned good at this. The 2 boys looked up at Heinrichsen. The one on the left, with curly black hair, blinked, losing his balance for a second, but then said, Okay. Heinrichsen nodded once firmly. He then began drawing on the floor around them with the same gypsum he had with the fire elemental. In his native tongue, he was chanting words, forming rhymes of some kind. I could not tell exactly why he was doing this. There appeared to be no real science to this. The mother was rubbing herself and her 2 boys. I blinked. They were breathing frost. I saw the body blanket next to me on the table start to have spikes of frost form all over it. I had covered the body earlier so Anae would not see her dead husband. Suddenly, I saw mold start to grow on the walls. The plants that were dead in the corners of the room started to bloom rapidly. The lights in the room dimmed. I felt as if someone else was here. This was much different than the fire creature Heinrichsen had called into reality. Vorshin's hair was standing on end, her teeth bared. Stop it, Vorshin. She just looked at me and snapped her teeth, licking the long, sharp canines she had. I was afraid of her for the first time since I had known her. What's happening? She growled ferociously. They are here. The spirits. Life is here. I did not know how or why Vorshin was acting like this. I had never seen her so unnerved. I looked around to see the spirits, but I could not see what she saw. Heinrichsen was now bellowing over the 3 in the chairs. Suddenly, the chairs were pulled together to form a triangle, so that Anae was not facing her children anymore. She shrieked and tried to get up, but Heinrichsen forced her down, looking into her eyes and chanting harshly. A voice vibrated out of the air. It resonated with the other 3 voices. The offering of these 3 lives is acceptable, a service to the shrine of life, healing sickness for their days. Harm no one physically, lest your children suffer disease and your children's children suffer malformity. I had a hard time understanding the vibrating voice, but Anae seemed to understand clearly. She looked scared out of her mind. She breathed quickly, as if she could not breathe enough air. She nodded and shook her boys. Say yes. Yes to the spirits now. Even the boys seemed to have perked up out of their death stupor to know something was here, something beyond their own perception. Yes, yes, yes! The boys started to cry while saying yes. I could not imagine that they knew what they were saying yes to. This was all so outside of what I thought possible. The air vibrated, and I saw all the air in the room move at once, distorting everything with ripples, as if some large transparent beast had moved. The next thing I know, blackness absorbed my consciousness as all of the air in the room was pulled out in an extreme pop. Wake up, Ashidoth. It is done. Heinrichsen was standing over me with his shirt off. He had a large red scar down his chest with several figures drawn over it. What's that? I said, pointing at his chest. My spirit brand. The spirits of healing have marked me as one of their own. They are happy that the three agreed to a life of service to them. I frowned in confusion. So you can call on them for favors because of the promise Ine and her boys made? He nodded and looked proud. You got more power, and they got into a life of servitude. Seems like a fair trade. No wonder you were so eager. He pointed to the sleeping Ine, whose face had completely cleared up, even the acid pockmarks from her alchemy vat labor. She and her children will have a good life, as long as they follow the Spirit's words. They were also saved from death. I cannot see why you were angry. Besides, I will not be able to call on them anymore. Your people's shroud is becoming more and more difficult for my spirits to cross, especially the spirits of life. I knew Heinrichsen had not used them to gain more power. That was just my own reaction. I needed to stop suspecting him from being someone he was not. He was not a backwards tribal. He was a sophisticated foreigner, and I was impressed by him. He was a sage from his own lands. We were peers in some odd way, both pursuing positive change in this world. I am sorry. You are a good friend to me, to my country. I am sorry, Heinrichsen. He grinned at me and offered a hand. I took it and then looked at the bread at the table. Heinrichsen had already eaten half of it. I ripped off a hunk and scarfed it down. Tomorrow, I will finish the necrocognition and blood work for the warrior. But we might be discovered before then. I would make sure that your fire servant and any other spirits are available to help us if we need it. The Ghoul Lord is known for his relentlessness, as well as his craving for violence upon the living. Heinrichsen ate another piece of bread with a heaping of butter on it. Most of it went into his beard. I have already drawn the brands. I am prepared to fight for my life if this Slothnik finds us. I clasped his shoulder. Thanks again, Heinrichsen. In the beginning, everything felt like it was impossible to accomplish. But with your help, things are starting to become a little easier. Don't get used to me winning all your battles and fulfilling your promises now. He grinned at me, wiping away the butter on his mustache. I laughed and left the room, going into my cool bedroom. I dreaded going to sleep. I was so tired from the shroud drawing and from the past couple of days that I did not want to face any nightmares. The bed was cold to my hot forehead. My body let go of all of my tension, melting into sleep. Ashidoth, you! Why did you do this? I could only stare at my father as he was dragged out the front door by two hulking ghouls, their dead blue eyes looking down with hate at my father. He thrashed against their large pale biceps hooked around his arms. Why? I only did it to pay for your sister's operation. Why did you turn me in? Why not your Ghoul Lord? Do you know how much he takes in a day alone? Do you? He had taken a kilogram of vitae, no small amount. It was my duty to Necroborg to report all thefts. I was told by Slothnik that he would not be harmed if I confessed. He had promised me that my father would not be harmed. He promised me I was doing the right thing. I felt everything churning inside me. My stomach knotted. I felt sick, so sick. Slothnik put a hand on my shoulder. His 4 albino eyes squinted as the sun was setting over the city. It was shining into my eyes, blinding the last time I could see him. Your duty to Necroborg is well beyond that of any normal citizen. I will make sure you are rewarded. My skin was cold and clammy. Why did I do this? I should have kept my mouth shut. What was I doing for my family by doing this? What was the real effect that I was having on Necroborg by turning him in? I was told he would not be harmed. My head began to spin, and I was clenching every muscle in my body. The walls seemed to swim momentarily. I breathed in and out deeply. Slothnik left with his detachment of ghouls. When the door closed and I could not hear their footsteps, I fell on my hands and knees, but the tears would not come. No matter how much I wanted them to, they would not come. I tried sobbing out loud, but I could not cry. I could only yell. I could only scream. Weeks seemed to pass. I don't remember what I did, or what Slothnik even gave me. I remember leaving my first Death Hand meeting and looking down at the lead mines. There was a lean man, with a face and body as dirty as mud and dust could make it. His eyes were dead blue, but his face and jaw. I saw my father, or at least I thought I saw him. He stumbled back into the mines. I raced down into the mine, dark corridors flooding by me, light disappearing, wet and dead bodies bouncing against mine. They filled the mine shafts back to back, crammed like ants and cockroaches. "Father? Father!" My cry was only answered by the chaos of pickaxes breaking stone, the bass splashes of feet moving in mud and thigh-high water. I keep racing, deeper and deeper into the throng of undead bodies, eventually having to crawl into a nest of them, stacked high, some of them completely submerged. The smell of rot makes me retch. I keep squeezing and wriggling against the undead bodies, deeper and deeper. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I wake up and take a deep breath. Cold, cold sweat pouring down my face and arms. I breathe deep again. I think my body forgot to breathe in the dream. I clutch my chest, and my heart pounds hard a single time, and then finally beats normally. The sun is rising. Chapter 5, Genesis Dusk. I surrounded the warrior's head with the lead connectors that were wired to dried blood and powdered lead. I ignited the powder, one pile at a time. Each flashed and burned a pale green. His eyes opened, a dead blue. I placed my nightmare glass on his forehead. After putting on my lead gauntlets, I rested my fingertips on the outermost connectors, gazing deeply into the nightmare glass. Heinrichsen overlooked my operation, noting all the materials I was using. "This is an incredibly wasteful art. So much lead and metal. That metal is poisonous, you know. Only spirits of death and decay surround it." Vorshin yawned a whine. "Not to anyone who uses nightmare glass. It is a conduit to the shroud. The Necroborgs call it undead gold, and they are right. It has an allure to me. I don't fully understand it." Heinrichsen grunted in understanding, watching as I twisted each connector, bending it to match the alignment of this man's soul. The nightmare glass showed the lead connectors twisting into the skull and side holes I had drilled earlier. The connectors pieced the brain, and the man's hands started to twitch. Without looking, I twisted the valves on the blood tanks for the vitae to start flowing. Blood began pumping into the body, through the tube work, into the neck, wrists, and thighs. Vorshin intently watched me. "He is now introducing vitae into the body. Right, to give it life, to reanimate it," Heinrichsen interrupted. Vorshin looked at Heinrichsen. "No. The vitae is the lubrication that allows an undead spirit to enter the body, to steal the life of the blood as sustenance. The lead attracts the spirit, but the blood will keep it there." Heinrichsen bug-eyed for a moment. "So any spirit of death enters this body? A spirit of a mass murderer could make its home there." Vorshin wagged her tail. "Yes, but this is where the necrocognition will come into play. The spirit's identity is overwritten and made into a soul. The soul can have the mental and physical attributes of the blood and body it is supplied with. So this mass murderer you speak of will be an entirely different person." Heinrichsen just stared at the body as rich velvet blood was piped into it. "Unholy." I adjusted the pale green lead connectors, twisting them to connect to each part of the brain. I checked the blood pressure and blood saturation. Everything was going smoothly. I applied the necrocognition buffers to the temples of the man's head, and then began bending each of the lead wires to the circles of lead. When they would touch, they would fuse to the buffers as necroelectromagnetism activated. The body jerked and finally went into a rigor mortis. Heinrichsen's eyes widened again. What was that? Vorschen raised a paw towards the body. Decay is reversing. The body is entering rigor mortis again. Once the Vitae's memories are sorted and circulation is completed, we will start to see the body die again. Heinrichsen's brows furrowed. Die? Why would you want that? This is anastasis, a resurrection. You will see the motions of life reversed, which means the body must die again to be reborn. This also kills all the necromites living in the body. Necromites? Vorschen cocked her head. Undead life that you cannot see, that feeds on life. It is what makes life sick, or decays dead life into dust again. I stared into the nightmare glass, my fingers now subtly playing on the lead connectors. The tiniest movement indicated where the spirit should fill the flesh. I had to guide the spirit to fill the organs first, the most basic of organs, the heart first. I had to teach it how to make the heart beat using its own necro will. I had to teach it why it was important. Then the blood began to circulate. I moved another connector, revealing the lungs to the spirit, showing it breath, breathing, what it did to keep its blood fresh, to keep everything else alive. The spirit mimicked my movements and was imprinted with the instructions. Minutes turned into hours, with the most basic of functions covered in the body. Heinrichsen remained the whole time, with Vorschen telling him what I was doing. Anne and her children stayed in an entirely different part of the smelter when I told her what I was doing this morning. She had nodded. I could tell she had tried to keep herself from crying, but I could hear her sobs as she gathered her two boys to the lead vats. I tried to tell her sorry, but she had rushed off, talking loudly over me, talking of small things like dinner and what she would make. Even though I had paid for her husband's body and she had offered it, I still felt I had stolen something from her. I shook my head to concentrate on showing the spirit the limbs of the body, how to move the fingers, what pain is, how to close wounds over days and weeks with blood clotting and tissue regrowth. For this, I taught him how to drink vitae, using the throat and esophagus, and finally the stomach to break down any life. The longest part was next. It took me 10 hours to show the spirit how the liver chemically recombines nutrients and vitae into what the body needs to heal or grow. Heinrichsen and Vorschen had long left to go see where Anne was. It was in the deep of the night that I introduced the spirit to the enormous complexities of the brain. I felt exhausted, but you only got one chance to necro-imprint. I had to do everything in one go. Normally this is a lot faster and easier with a team of necrocognitioners, but I was it. I was the only chance for this creature to live, for this demi-dead to be sentient. I began to put small lead contacts on the eyes, lifting up the eyelids and sliding them under. I then inserted 2 more lead connectors into the brain, then bent them into the contacts. They fused with a harsh green flash, burning through the eyelids. I fluttered the lead connectors to the temporal cortex and then the parietal lobe. It is at this moment that a spirit becomes a soul, completely blank and ready for the necro-imprinting of memories, behaviors, languages, and other mental traits. A voice whispered weakly to my mind through the nightmare glass. I am alone? I am alone? I am alone! The soul began to whimper and cry out in the darkness of its own mind, primal fear and desire running rampant. The nightmare glass showed an explosion of spiritual activity in the glass. It was trying to find something, anything to hold on to. It was trying to use the brain to find some rationality, some pattern or reference point. I gathered my strength to communicate to the soul through the shroud. My nose began to bleed. My skin instantly became drier. My lips split as I licked them. You are not alone. I am not alone? No, you are with me, your creator, Ashidoth. Ashidoth. I know this name. The star of the grave, the only light in the shroud. Yes, that is my name. I felt the soul reach through the shroud. I did not expect this, and was too slow to retreat from its spectral fingers that reached into my mind through the nightmare glass. It sifted through my memories, drawing out painful ones, proud ones, knowledge. I batted it away feebly, only after it had gotten to most of my memories. I was getting too tired to do this work. It had been at least 16 hours. My limbs felt like rubber and my face burned. I had to go back in. I had to finish this. I did not need a mindless ghoul that I had to keep on a leash. I saw the soul waiting on the other side of the glass, forming images of the memories it had taken. I saw my mother, sister, father, graduation day, making my first ghoul, my first imprint, all flashed so quickly across the surface. The shroud took another toll of my life. I think I vomited and soiled myself at once as more life force fled my body. But I could not tell. I was in the midst of this soul's presence in this body, in the middle of the shroud. I could still faintly feel my fingers moving the lead connectors, guiding the soul to the memories of the blood I had given it. Such pain, such power. I miss Mother. Where is Heracult? Why did she have to die? The shroud is death forever, never changing. There is only remorse and regret. There is only melancholy. I tried to ignore the soul, pushing memories of the blood upon its eyes. The soul was awash in new experiences, some boring, some exciting, some painful, some ecstatic. Hundreds of people's experiences rained down upon its brain. I could faintly see the phantom flashes of light in the nightmare glass that my physical body stared into. You are a warrior. I spoke to it, trying to define what shape the soul would take, what identity that would sum up its purpose in life. The soul brightened into a cone of light, searching the memories and language it was learning for what it meant to be a warrior. It saw martial skill with fist and foot, swordplay, and learned the intricacies of ranged combat such as taking cover, suppression fire, and more. It learned of killing and of dying. I am your sister. I am willing to give my life to fight for you. I gritted my teeth. Damn it, I had contaminated the soul. No, you are a warrior. I guided the connectors to other memory centers. I vaguely guided a lead connector to begin destroying my memories that had tainted the brain. I know what you are doing, Ashidoth, and I need you to stop. What? How could it know what I was doing? I kept racing for each memory cluster and goring it from the brain. I know what you know. I will destroy myself. I will destroy Heracult. I froze. If it did know how to retreat into the shroud, it could potentially undo all my work. I know how to fix this, Ashidoth. I know how to fix all of this. I was too weak and too paralyzed by the soul's words. Necrocognition was a very strict field of necromancy. It had driven more than one man insane. It had also produced some of the most brilliant demi-dead to help Necroborg. I could not risk this soul undoing my hard work, ruining this body and all the vitae I had stolen. I lifted my hands from the lead connectors. I would have to reason with this cornucopia of souls. I need you to help me kill a lot of people. I need a warrior. If you know everything about me, then you know just how much I need you. Please, take the memories and skills of the warriors and forget the rest. But I am your sister. I don't want to forget about you, or my love for you, or mother, or father. I won't forget the hatred of Gabrita, or the will of Bones. I began to cry out of nowhere. You don't want love. You don't want the burden of knowing love and losing it, of hating and doing wrong. You don't want any of it. All of these memories you have given me, they all have loved and had it taken from them. There is a justice to be completed. I want to fix this. I know how to fix this. I am Heracult, the Lichess Maiden. Surrender to your pain and know resolve. Know me and know life. I blinked in confusion. I felt the tears continue to pour. The sobbing fades slowly from my curled lips with thick saliva and blood mingling. I took my hands off the lead connectors and then began to slowly remove them. I dropped them, one black and bloody wire after another, into a pan splattered with blood. Then the contacts, and finally the tube work was removed. The soul would now complete its templating and fill the mind. becoming one with the flesh. Heracult was alive. She could have been brought back at any time by the will of Bones. This was not the surprising event. She was alive with his spirit of vengeance, with his knowledge, with the knowledge of hundreds. Who knew what she was going to become? I just hoped it would be the warrior I needed. I just hoped I would not have to see her die again. I left the room, going out to get something to eat. My legs shook, and my arms did not want to carry even the small cup of water and bread they held. Heinrichsen walked into the room, looking at the floor, stroking his curly red beard. I did not have the energy for conversation. I simply fed myself in small nibbles and sipped at the water. My mind was on fire with what had happened. I wanted to sleep, but I knew it would not come for a few hours more. Heinrichsen sat down, closer to me than he had ever before. His voice was gravelly, and he smelled strongly of dust and sweat. They are building a Sheol. It was a long moment as I took another small drink before responding. What? Your people are building a Sheol. A Sheol! Heinrichsen smacked a cup off the table and kicked a chair back, breaking it. I don't understand, Heinrichsen. I could not muster the energy to be scared or angry or more inquisitive. An open gate between the shroud and the material realm. Spirits and man will be able to cross over whenever they wish. The two worlds will eventually become one as the opening of the Sheol spreads. I clutched my cup to my chest, pondering what he said. Necromancers often had large panes of nightmare glass to pull the shroud through, but the cost of using the shroud still had to be paid in life. But a permanent opening would get rid of this. There would be no need of nightmare glass. But then, why would the spirits do the bidding of any necromancer? It did not make sense. That would mean that all necromancers would be powerless. We would have nothing to bargain with the shroud if we could not pay in life. The spirits of the dead could just take our life force if they wanted. Heinrichsen nodded. But if you are already dead, you would be considered a spirit of death to them. And you still have lead, which could easily be used to prod the spirits into action. But the arc spirits of decay and death would not pay any heed to physical metals, only the vast quantity of souls, murder, and breakdown. I shook my head. No, there's more to this. I was working on something massive, if but a tiny piece of that framework. My people are intelligent. They would not do something that would put them under the power of your fickle spirits. Heinrichsen smiled at me. I frowned. What? So you believe that my spirits are the same spirits you were talking about? I caught myself and laughed. Yes, I guess I do. It fits together too well, especially after seeing that spirit of healing or life or whatever. It behaved too much like something from the shroud. Heinrichsen then waved off his glorious moment. That is not important. What is important is to stop this whole project. No matter what your people are building, we must destroy it. And I believe you will agree with me, since it fuels the will of Bones' powers. I shrugged and nodded. Yes, I do. They must be destroyed, but just remember your end of the bargain. We stop the threat of my people, and you do not expose our weakness to yours. Heinrichsen paused for a small bit, and then nodded. I will honor my promise, of course. So how did your, ritual go? There is a problem with her. Heinrichsen's face screwed up in confusion. What? Her? It was a him the last time we talked. I covered my face with both my hands. I made a mistake. My mind got too close to the soul. The soul took most of my memories. The soul is now thinking that it is my sister, on a mission of vengeance against the will of Bones for her own death. Heinrichsen's eyebrows raised high above his pale blue eyes. Well, that's still good. Yes, but it complicates things. She is going to be much harder to control and command. She will have a mind entirely driven by her own desire. We needed a weapon of pure killing power, someone who could take a hit by a rot wand and keep killing. This complicates things so much. Heinrichsen mumbled for a moment, before placing his hands on the table. Perhaps she is more helpful now. She knows necromancy, right? I nodded. Well, she can help you in that manner, then. You will need everything you can get to destroy the Sheol, or whatever it is they're building. Vorschen padded into the room silently, head lowered, her teeth bared. She growled low, and then she growled even lower. Heinrichs and I followed her gaze, our eyes finally resting on the door. There was 3 slow knocks on the reinforced door. Well, that is the end of the first half of my book, Ashidoth the Necromancer. I really hope you guys have enjoyed this. And again, please consider picking it up on Amazon, which you can read it on your computer for the Amazon Kindle for PC, or you can read it on any mobile device through the Kindle app for Android or any Apple iPhone. Well, if there's a lot of interest out there, I will go ahead and record the second half of this. Maybe we can put up a Kickstarter or something, or if there's a tremendous interest, I'll just record it and throw it up there. I don't know what I'll do. But let me know what you guys thought down below. Thank you.